What's up, everybody? It's Chad from Ask Chad Grassy Logic here on episode 11. I'm here with Councilor Bencomo. She's joining me today. She's our city councilor here in Las Cruces, so it's a really eventful episode that we're having today. And so today we're actually going to be talking about Councilor Bencomo as one of the things. April 1st marks a year, so about 2 days, we're hitting a year that we started adult sales here in New Mexico. We're going to be talking about that Texas checkpoint bill and where it's at and really what happened since the last week. And it's 420. Do you know where your kids are? So that's really, just what we're going to talk about. And without further ado, Councilor Bencomo, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. I'm so excited this exists. I
Thank
think
you.
it's so important. Like Chad said, my name is Joanna Bencomo. I'm the city councilor for District 4, which is kind of like the northwest part of town. But I am one of a 6-person city council plus our mayor, of course.
Nice, yeah, and I've actually, sat at a few of the council hearings and everything, and during the votes, and I give you guys a few cheers.
Cheers.
Yeah, and as you guys don't know, our city council is actually majority women, other than the mayor. So it's really great to see that, because normally you just see a bunch of dudes, and it's really great to see something different and more progress in the city. So it's really great to see that, and thank you again for joining me.
Yeah, I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah, we're gonna get down. We're actually gonna get to her questions at the very end of the show, because I want to go through and talk about a few things first, because Councilor Bencomo has actually been a part of some of the stuff that I'm talking about. The first thing is April 1st. And what that means here in New Mexico, if you're new to New Mexico, we started adult use last year. And what that means is we started selling to pretty much everybody who's over 21, or if you have a medical cannabis card, you've always been able to buy cannabis. I cut my long hair on the same day. I think you guys remember I had hair like down to here. That was the mark of when I was supposed to cut my hair, and it was a sad day, but that is a year since I've cut my hair almost. It was a day of celebration, rejoice. Everybody really just had an uplifted feeling. The shops were super busy. I remember going to the midnight release. Did you go to the midnight release?
I didn't.
You didn't?
No,
okay,
I was
you were
in
probably
bed.
busy. Yeah, you're probably busy.
I was in bed.
I debated not going, but we ended up going anyway. So it was really cool seeing that celebration and everything, that line wrapping around the building, that whole historical thing. So I just really want to look back, in the year and kind of see what's changed from then until now. Like really even with, with the city stuff, with what you guys have done. I mean, really, what were your guys' thoughts going into that? Like, what did you really want to accomplish? Like, okay, do we want to be more progressive, or do we want to kind of crack down on it? I mean, what was the thought process?
Thank you. That's a great question. Also, I cannot believe it's been a year. That's wild.
I know, right?
Yeah, that's really wild. I'm excited to talk a little bit more with you about that night, because honestly, it was really incredible. It was really exciting. So the city doesn't get a lot of authority generally on these things. And really what the state allowed for cities, municipalities to do was really have authority over zoning, which really means where our store is going to go, right? And one of the things, like, we thought it out really well. We brought in experts. We brought in folks to talk to us about how to best do this, because for many of us on the council, this was an issue we cared about for a really long time, and we really lobbied for this to become legalized. And so we wanted to make it as progressive as possible, and as for the industry to be able to thrive. And I think a lot of people, often I see that still have like one foot in, one foot out. Like, yes, we will support it, we want to make it thrive, but we still want to restrict it. I'm from the mindset that that's just silly. That's not going to work. And so, over a year and a half ago, right, when we were discussing these zoning policies, we thought, let's make it as fruitful as possible. And so that's how we ended up with what we have right now. I'll be happy to talk more about some of the changes, some of the things that I think should be changed. But one of the things that we didn't even talk about, didn't even cross our minds, was operating hours. Like, we didn't even talk about it. It's wild. And it wasn't until I think some of the advocates, some of you all, were like, hey, April 1st is coming around. What's the hour situation? And we're like, oh, that's right. But honestly, it was just too late to do anything about it. And of course, we ended up having, I think city staff brought us a resolution to try to change that. And we all said, why?
Yeah, I mean, that's nothing.
What for?
Yeah, I mean, there's no issues, yet. And so why change it and all of a sudden go that route? Because to be honest, there's really not that many in the city that are doing a 24-hour model or late. So I mean, most of them choose to close. I think the latest I know is 10 p.m. unless you're the 24-hour ones. And so the idea around it is you're only open if you have the product or if you want to be open.
Yes.
So I mean, it to me, it's,
And if you have the staff
Yeah.
and if you have the capacity, right? And I think for people who are going to any of the cannabis stores at 2 a.m.,
Mhm.
I'm assuming they're people who just left the ER.
There you
who,
go.
Like, right? Like who folks who really need it. So I don't foresee us changing that.
I'm glad, and and Las Cruces is one of the only cities in the state that have done
Mhm.
that. I mean, Albuquerque, chose some times. I'm not too sure what theirs is, but they've actually been more restrictive than
Yeah.
we have, and actually
Yeah.
that's really refreshing because Southern New Mexico, we're known for being conservative and a little
know.
country hick and this and that, and I'm from Alamogordo originally, so we
Yeah.
get that a lot.
Well,
And
that's true. No, I'm kidding.
that is true. That's where Eastern New Mexico starts.
I'm just kidding.
I call it the South Park of New Mexico. And it's really great to be in a city where the city councilors are really supportive, and you can just really reach out and you guys listen, and excuse me, you women listen, and and it's great to hear that, because a lot of constituents say, oh, I feel like my government doesn't listen to me, this and that. And I was actually talking to a buddy today from California, and he's in the business there, and I was telling him about there's a time where I've called the DOH and we got some stuff changed that way. He's like, you can just call the DOH and they talk to you, and I'm like, I guess.
Yeah.
He was like, yeah, but we have less people in the state, so that makes sense. And we're a newer industry, and it's just great that we're wanting to do this the right way.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate you guys being so supportive, and they are supportive. They will talk to the cannabis industry, and I've actually sat down with my actual city councilor, Councilor Grant.
Good.
She's my counselor.
Love it.
Yeah, I've sat her. She's great.
Yeah.
And if you're watching, hello.
Well, I told her I was going to be here. So.
Okay, cool. Yeah. She's a great lady. She listened to, it was all for the cannabis stuff and all that. And, it was just great to see that. So I hope we can continue that and keep that same relationship that we've had with, the city and everything. And as long as we get more businesses to work with us, we can probably work better.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned there's a few things you thought maybe that maybe should change. What's that on your mind?
Yeah. So some of the buffers,
Okay.
honestly, some of those numbers are completely arbitrary. Like they really are. Like 300 feet keeps kids away. Okay.
Yeah. Like
200 feet does. I don't know. It's really strange for me. And so we've definitely, we've done a ton of special use permits for people, right? Who might be close to another retailer, who might be close to a residential area. And so people can still open up those spaces if they're within that buffer. They just have to apply for a special use permit, which eats up a lot of time and resources. And honestly, if we're just giving the special use permits, then I feel like why have the policy in the first place? And so right now, one of the buffers that I really feel like should go away is the 300-foot buffer from a residential zone. Yeah. Given that we are so rural, right? Yeah. We have all these incredible corridors. The ones I think about are Solano, El Paseo, Picacho, who are really blighted, who there's a ton of retail space open. There's so many empty buildings that cannabis retailers could potentially take it over and redevelop the area. But then we have, obviously, these corridors are literally a block away from residential areas. So for me, it just feels really silly, for lack of a better word, to have this 300-foot buffer when, by the way, it doesn't exist for apartment complexes, which I think is very discriminatory and has like a lot of undertones of like, well, those are poor folks. Who cares what's in their communities, right? And I really feel like instead of adding a buffer to those places, we say, you know what, it's good. It's good for redevelopment. It's good for the community. It's good for a neighborhood. And so I think with that, though, we obviously do have to have conversations about kids, and those should be happening no matter what anyway, right? Yeah. But for me, that's one of the things that I really hope we can push the count. It came to council. It died on I think 3-4 vote. And I really would like to bring it back and hopefully get rid of it.
Me too, and the industry does too, and I advocated for the no 300-foot rule too, because we also have bars that are right next door to each other too in town. So I mean,
and to schools.
Yeah, and to schools, and I don't see anything wrong with 2 dispensaries right next to each other, or a building away. I mean, it's just how businesses usually run. I mean, look at Lowe's and Home Depot. Usually their model is one is usually about a mile or 2 from each other.
Walgreens and CVS.
Yeah, exactly. And Walmart's right next to some some cases. So yeah, I really don't see a reason for that either, other than the stigma that was based around cannabis and just trying to be restrictive just to be restrictive.
Honestly, most of the restrictions that have been placed now after legalization, I think are still very much rooted in the stigma, the reefer madness that like people have to unlearn. Folks that are supportive of the industry being legalized still have some of that. I think it just is about unlearning some of those things.
Yeah, and you know, some people need to start also taking responsibility for their kids.
Yes,
yeah, you know, and
absolutely.
parents need to really start parenting, and that's why I mentioned that it's 420. Do you know where your kids are?
Yeah.
And I'll get onto that later because you remember in the 90s and I think the 80s they had that commercial. It's 10 o'clock. Do you know where your kids are?
Yeah. That's like, really clever.
Yeah, it is, and you know, it really pertains to today. You know, like these parents. They're not watching their kids because they're too busy working. They're not watching the kids because they just don't want to watch their kids. And sometimes it is because they're busy. You know, don't get me wrong, that does happen. But
I also think sometimes I think parents don't know how to have those conversations, right? Like they don't have the education on something like this to then feel comfortable enough to share that, and so they shame it.
Yeah.
And shame creates curiosity for kids, and guess what? They're going to go find that information somewhere else. And so if you're not educated as a parent on how to talk to your kids about these things, frankly, anything, the stuff in your medicine cabinet, which is legitimately dangerous for children, right?
Definitely.
And so I really think it's some of what you say. And really another part is just like a huge lack of education of people not knowing how to have these conversations.
I agree. And that's one reason why I created this show, you know, or continued on doing podcasts, is I wanted to continue the education because I see there's such a lack of it when it comes to cannabis that that gap needs to be filled. And so if parents, if you're on this and you're not sure, you know, then maybe this show will help you figure out how to talk to your children with it. But, you know, other parents do need to, you know, start being parents. But yeah, you're right. There is, you know, such a huge gap in that education part, you know, especially with adults. You know, even with adults, and you know, with a new industry like this, education goes such a long way. And do your due diligence, you know, look up stuff. You know, there's a bunch of YouTube channels as well. You know, I'm not the only podcast out there. So there's a bunch of stuff. If you know this isn't your niche, you know, find something out there. But yeah, talk to your kids. You know, that's the number one thing that I try to tell people. You know, that you keep your kids off drugs in the street if you talk to them. You know, if you're involved with their lives. I mean, my parents are heavily involved in my life. Growing up, and you know, I did dumb things when I was younger. Don't get me wrong; I wasn't an angel, but they were there to correct me. You know, like don't do that, you know, or do this once you're this age or whatever. So it's really nice. Anyway, we're kind of getting off track there. We'll get back to the April 1st stuff. Since then, no. I mean, these are great conversations that need to be had. And you know, the 300-foot buffer thing was just one of the examples that one of those conversations, and it goes back to one of the concerns was, what about the kids? What about the kids? And that's always the number one concern. What about the kids? I'm like, what about it? They're not my kids. Like, I'm not responsible for your kids. Frankly, you know, I'll do what I can to keep them away from whatever. But, you know, at the end of the day, that's not my responsibility. But yeah, I do feel like the 300-foot buffer does need to be revisited at some time. And, you know, a couple other things too. But, you know, that sticks in my head too is the number one. You know, when I was thinking when you're talking, I was like, you know what, that's probably my number one thing that needs to change too. What would be probably another thing that you think that would probably need to change for the industry here?
That's a really good question. I don't know. I feel like I've been focused on this one particular thing so much. Right now, it's the 300-foot buffer with residential zones, but I think we could look at the buffer between retailer to retailer, right? That was around like a density issue, right? We didn't want all of them in one place to be really dispersed all over the city. But perhaps it's really that, and like finding, I don't know, maybe it's like supporting local entrepreneurs, right? Who like who don't have the capital, who don't have resources, and supporting more like small folks, so small entrepreneurs who want to get into the business.
I agree 100%. You know, that's something good that, you know, you're looking at, because there is a lot of people who have these ideas or, you know, these great skills. They just don't have the funds, and they don't know how to get the funds. So yeah, I mean, if the city would do that, that'd make us even more progressive in the state, especially with this industry. And, you know, being so close to Texas and Juarez, you know, people are probably like, what the heck? Why are you guys doing this? Well, I mean, what we're doing, it seems to be working so far. You know, and I like what's going on here and everything. And, you know, we even would go down to Sunland Park and we'd try to talk to them, but, you know, they kind of were a little more restrictive and afraid of it, which is, you know, fair. And this is new.
Well, I'm excited to be like leading in the area, right? Like for people to look to Las Cruces and say, okay, look what they're doing. People to come talk to us. I would love that. If you ever encounter other electeds from other communities like Sunland Park or Alamogordo or Deming or whatever, like tell them to come talk to us, because I don't feel afraid of this. You know what? Another thing that I think is really important is that at the city level, like internally, we refer to cannabis retail as retail. Like it's just another retailer.
Yeah.
Like we don't have to differentiate it from a clothing store, from a nail salon, right?
Yeah,
like
a liquor
it's
store,
another particularly, right? But like it's just another retail location.
Yeah, it's just another place to buy something. And that's one thing I've been trying to push to is normalizing the cannabis industry as a regular industry within our state and our city. And it's a legitimate business. They pay their taxes, they pay their employees, they pay them paid time off.
They create jobs.
Yeah, they create a ton of jobs. And actually one of the studies I was going to wait until the end to say, but this fits in so well here. UNM did a study, and they did a study in Colorado and found out that places that have dispensaries near that area, the unemployment dropped significantly, meaning it creates a lot of jobs. And this is kind of the opposite of what we were being told, pre-legalization, like, oh, there's going to be a lot of homeless everywhere, oh, the jobs, this and that. But it's creating jobs, and it's creating very good paying jobs. Even here in New Mexico, I was reading some articles earlier in the week, and it was stating that especially the areas close to Texas are doing very well. And they're saying that it's obviously wonder why. And they have to hire more people. And so it's just one of those things that's great to see. And we're one of those areas that kind of benefits.
Totally.
We benefit definitely heavily. And so since a year from then, from April 1st, like we'll go back to that. What are some other things that you've kind of seen change? Like, have you seen, my number one thing in my head is, have you seen the community's mindset kind of change, to it? Has it become more positive, or has it been a little more negative?
That's a good question. I kind of see it in 3 buckets. There's the folks that are like, yes, we're so excited. How do we support it? It's not just the advocates, but like people who are like, we should have been here a long time ago. There's the people who are like, yeah, we support it, but we still really unsure. Those like 1 foot in, 1 foot out folks who are like, but there should still be these restrictions, right? There's those folks. And then there's, I think, a group of folks who I would argue are definitely a minority, but very vocal minority, who just will never be supportive, right? And for me, it's like, do you want to spend time there trying to convince these, like waste, frankly, your time there trying to convince people of something that's just, they're never going to agree on? Or do I spend the majority of my time with the folks who are the majority, who just might be unsure though, right? And really trying to educate people. And I think you all do a really good job at like getting out there, coming to city council, speaking on the issue, having people share their own stories. Like that goes a really long way. The pharmacy, like that was such a huge and exciting win that I hope we talk about in a little bit. But so for me, I kind of see it, it's been a little bit of everything, but I think the folks who are really staunchly against it, I really do think they're just a really vocal, loud minority. And we should really be spending our time with the folks that are like, yeah, but I don't really know yet, right? Like those are the folks that really need that education. Yeah,
and they kind of need that little more push, because they're kind of teeter-totter on the edge. Other people, they've had their mind made up. There's really no point, and it is what it is. Agree to disagree. But yeah, that's true. And I was just kind of curious because Cruces didn't really seem like it had a crazy negative mindset for cannabis to start with. I grew up in Alamogordo, so I grew up coming back and forth from here to start with growing up. So it never really seemed like that, and it's a college town. So it's a little more progressive because of that to start out with. So it's really great to see that we continued that, and that more people are kind of coming like, we should have done this anyway. Like why tell people what to do in that aspect? It hasn't killed anybody, so why not? And the state has actually made quite a bit of money. $2.5 million a month in tax. I mean, a month since a year, and that's a lot of money. And not only that, it's the local municipalities. Do you know how much Cruces has got?
I wish I would have.
I should have thought of that earlier.
I know. I wish I would have came prepared with that. I'm gonna send it to you. You can share it on your next podcast. But it's significant. It's significant, and it's just going to our general fund, and we can decide to designate it and spend it on community care, on mental health, on whatever, honestly, that we want to then use those funds for. We can.
Nice. Yeah, and I think
it's significant.
No, it is. It's a huge significant thing. I've seen Cruces change, and it's molding, and it's becoming this bigger city, and it's more. It's changing. And there's more different people coming here, and so we need to change with the times. And you guys are you women you're on that. You women and man are on that. Until the next election, we don't know who the next mayor is going to be.
This year.
Is it this year? It is this year. You're right. Yeah. So coming up in a couple months, we'll figure out who the next mayor is going to be. But for now, it's women and man. but yeah, it's great that the sky didn't fall.
No, quite
The
the opposite.
Cruces or the state didn't just get engulfed into the center of the core of the earth. None of that happened. There's not mass crime running around the city and all that. And we were actually talking about one of the 24-hour shops. There was less crime in that because someone's always there.
Yep.
And it kind of deters people. And that makes sense. There's less crime when someone's just there.
Yeah.
Just they don't have to do anything. Just being there deters crime. And that's good to hear. That's something that needs to go into study. It's like 24-hour cannabis dispensaries deter crime.
No, there is, and honestly, it's so good to hear from folks like that. That was High Horse who came and said, "Look, this is our experience," and because people love to bring studies that are like 4 years old around kids, and all. People love to do that, and I think that's incredible. But I also think what goes even further are personal stories of people sharing, like, this is what cannabis has meant for me in my life, but two, like, I work at a cannabis retail and this is what it's done to the neighborhood. And those kinds of experiences, direct experiences, go a really long way for people like me.
Oh yeah, definitely. And it's just good to hear that.
Yeah,
It really is. Because we could be super restrictive because just right next door is Texas, and I'll get onto the bill that they're proposing. Some of you already know about it, but they're very restrictive when it comes to cannabis. And so those people, the people that actually need it, the patients there, they have to come here to get it and then, risk it going back.
Sucks for them, good for us, right?
Yeah. We benefit from the taxes. So, I mean, I'm not really complaining there. So, but yeah, also, guys, I wanted to say this earlier. If you come across any dispensaries or anything selling to minors, you can tell the CCD and let them know if for a dispensary anything is breaking the law. You can call the CCD and let them know. Don't call the local PD, call the local CCD, and then they'll go down through the process with that. There's really no point of bogging up the system. I really just wanted to put that in there because, there is an issue, and we'll get down to that in a second. Kids using cannabis, and, I know you guys deal with that. And it is an issue, but I think it's an issue that stems from many things and not just one thing.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that. I just wanted to continue with the celebration of a year. We got what I say, 2 days, I think, until the 1st. So I'm really excited. I don't know if any places are going to have sales or anything like that. I'm not too sure.
Yeah.
It's kind of quiet in the cannabis atmosphere. There's a lot of competition right now. So
ooh, okay.
Yeah, a lot of competition right now. So some people are kind of like, okay, and if one place does it, another would do it. And another thing that we're really pushing for as an industry is having an industry discount. Some dispensaries already give it, but I kind of feel like all of them should give it. Like I appreciate a veteran discount, but more is what I appreciate is the people that work in the industry getting a discount.
Cool, like, that's amazing.
Yeah, I think it's cool. And I think if you own a shop, and you have the capabilities and you're able to do it, give an industry discount. If someone else comes from another shop, like they work for someone else and they come to your shop, why not give them a discount? 10%, help them with that tax. So a little bit off the tax on there. So I don't see anything wrong with it, and it's something that I think is positive for the industry.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. No, it is. Yeah, it's something I just remembered. Idea. I was like, someone talked about it earlier today. I was like, oh, great idea.
Yeah.
And I'll probably talk about it in the next episode. But anyway, that's really what I had. Is there anything you have about throughout the years? Anything that you see has changed significantly in your mind?
I guess the only other thing is that I kind of talked about this already, but there has been so many people who've come to speak about their experience with cannabis, people you'd never expect, like Senator Carrie Hamlin came and said, I use cannabis. And
I remember that.
And she did that very purposefully because people have this idea of who is doing cannabis, right? And it's everybody, everybody.
Everyone. Yeah.
And so I really think I think we're beginning to break down some of those stereotypes for sure.
I do too, and I appreciate Senator Hamlin because I've interviewed her before on the last podcast. That was a really nice lady, and she's a grower. They grow cannabis, and they're very open about growing her. I think it's her wife now. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah. They've been married for a long time. They were one of the first people to get married in Durham County.
Oh, see, that's another information I didn't know. Congrats to them. That's kind of like a boast thing.
Yeah.
They grow. And so I'm like, oh, that's great. What are you growing this year? And so it's always a great conversation because I grow cannabis. And that's one thing I forgot to mention is you do have the right to grow in New Mexico. Yeah. You can have 6 immature, 6 mature plants, no more than 12 mature per household. In the law, it actually didn't limit immature plants. So if you had like 5 people living there, they could all have 6 plants. According to what I read in the law, I was like, oh, okay, but I don't know who'd want to do that because you're really worried about the mature plants and not really the veg plants. And some people who do grow on a larger scale, they have their own little process. But have you tried to grow anything or maybe family members?
No, actually, I don't. I think the only person that I know who grows at home is Senator Hamlin. So.
I usually ask that because I'm just kind of curious. I'm like, I want to know if my representatives grow
Yeah,
too. It's
yeah.
kind of a cool thing to talk about. I was like, that's cool.
Maybe the mayor does. No,
maybe that's why he has just that cool demeanor all the time. Okay, it failed.
it's
All
how
right.
rumors get started. Sorry.
Yeah, you're right. Sorry, my bad. But yeah, he is always chill. Even if like an ordinance doesn't pass or something, he's like, okay.
He's been doing this a long time.
Yeah, he's like,
yeah.
all right, it happens.
Yeah.
So moving on, we'll talk about kids in cannabis. Now, I know the city has been, the whole state essentially, deals with that. What is something the city is doing to kind of mitigate that, other than, what we talked about earlier, it's on the parents a lot.
Well, I think the most important thing to remember with kids is kids didn't start using cannabis April 1st, 2022, right? Like this is an issue that has existed for a really long time. Kids using any activity that they're not supposed to be involved in, right? Alcohol use, cannabis use, opioid use, vaping, right? Like there's all of these things that all kids are vulnerable to, especially teenagers, right? I have a stepdaughter, she's 15. We talk to her about all these things because it's important to, and that is our responsibility in our household. But these issues have existed for a long time. And for me, the biggest thing is when it comes to cannabis, the longer we allow the black market to survive, the longer kids will have access to cannabis. And so I really hope there are no retailers who are selling to minors. I haven't heard of that happening in the city. I have not, which is a really big deal. And I just feel like people who have invested thousands of dollars, their life, sweat, blood, and tears into this industry know what's at stake. And so I haven't heard of that happening, right? But I think we have to tackle, for me, I'm a social worker. And so for me, the bigger issue is, why are kids going down this path to begin with? People always say, well, cannabis is the gateway drug. I think the gateway to any of this behavior is trauma, and undiagnosed trauma, untreated trauma, kids who are experiencing hard things at home, at school, that go unnoticed. And so then they want coping, right? And they end up using any substance, right, that helps them do that, instead of going to see professional help or going to their parents. Perhaps they can't go to their parents or their caretakers. And for me, that's the biggest thing, is how are we reaching kids way before they're in this life, right? Like way before they're using substances that they don't know enough about yet to use them, that they don't have like the capacity to make that kind of consent for themselves. And so for me, it's really about working with the schools and increasing behavioral health services, access to that, so that we are getting at the root cause of it.
Oh, and that's great. That's something that a lot of people don't really bring up either, including myself. But you have, that's your expertise. So it's great to have you that opinion and everything, because I rarely get that on the show or even in person. And so it's great to hear that, it needs to be at the root of, the issue. And I agree. Some of this is just left for nature to take course. And when nature takes course, it's not always the best result, especially when the person that's dealing with it doesn't know what's going on or how to deal with it. And it just gets worse and worse and worse. Because I smoked weed when I was like 14 in middle school. I got caught by my dad, and he turned into Sergeant Bolzano for about 2 weeks. And, but after I was in trouble and after the whole thing was over, they explained to me the reason why. They said, son, you're male, you're Latino, and we don't want you to get stuck in the judicial system. We just simply don't want you to get in trouble. And my mom told me I wasn't against cannabis. She said, I've always been for cannabis. She said, I just didn't want you to get in trouble for it. She said, that was my only concern. And so when I heard that, I was like,
I get it. Thanks, Mom.
Okay. So that probably saved me a lot of trial and error myself. And,
tough stuff, right?
Like really tough stuff. I watched my older sister go through it too. She's 8 years older than me. And so she did most of the dumb things for me growing up. So that was another reason why. But, when I started doing it, they sat me down. I was like, look, this is why. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. I don't want to get caught up in that. And I'm glad, because I went on, I joined the military. I had a top secret clearance, I had a TSSCI. I wouldn't have been able to do that if something had happened. And, I went a different route. So that's just a test to you guys that, we're all going to be dumb and be dumb kids. And like she said, and
even
I was going to
dumb adults sometimes.
Yeah,
honestly.
you're right. Everybody makes mistakes. We're human.
I ran for office, for example. crazy.
Yeah, we'll get to that. I was actually going to ask you, what made you run for office. We'll get to that in a second. We'll finish this conversation with kids because it keeps popping up. I keep seeing articles about kids having edibles in school and stuff.
Yeah.
But one thing they don't mention is it's from the black market.
Yeah.
Like almost all, and if it isn't from the black market, they got it from the parents,
Yeah.
who didn't, put it away correctly,
Yeah.
or they got it from an older sibling, or some family member or something who just didn't put it away correctly. And in one of the articles, Shena Jaramillo, shout out to you. I've known her for years. She does the Seacrest stuff. She said that if it's best to keep your edibles in the package you got it, because you can tell if the kid ate 50 milligrams. You can tell if someone took a part of it because it's in there, and you're taking blocks off. So that does make sense. Or you can tell if the whole thing's gone. Like, okay, where's my candy? So it's one of those things, and I want to just point out that, guys, majority of what these kids are getting to all is black market, and we're not going to tackle the black market issue if we keep having this stigma on it. And we keep being so restrictive. And another thing for me is taxes. I know being government, but for me, the taxes increasing really alarms me, because if you look at California and other states, one of the reasons why the black market is so pronounced there is because of the taxes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
That's
and the
really
businesses
good to
there are
know.
having a hard time getting by, and their only way of getting by is to sell it on the black market. And and one thing we didn't do, which I'm glad, is we didn't restrict the cities to say, hey, you can opt out to sell. Because
my God, no, I'm
that
so
would
glad.
have been been crazy.
No, that would have been awful.
Yeah, it would have been so dumb. And only 30% of the cities in California are able to sell cannabis. And so that's another reason why their black market.
Colorado did that as well, right?
Yeah,
my family lives in Colorado, and my brother is a cannabis user, and my parents live in a really tiny rural county. My parents live in Holyoke, Colorado.
Oh, I don't even know where that's at.
Only people who live there know where that's at.
It's
like 2,000 people live there, like 30 minutes from Nebraska, an hour from Wyoming.
You guys are way up there, yeah.
Very rural, very conservative, and that county opted out. They were like, no, we're not having any of that here. And my brother got in a lot of trouble, and he was one of these young Latino kids that got in a lot of trouble, and they fumbled the bag on that for sure.
Oh yeah, and
I'm so glad we didn't do that.
Me too, and that's something that we pushed. Like, please, for the sake of us, do not, because my dad's from Fremont County, Colorado. He's from Florence, and they opted out too. And so when I go visit my family, the only thing there is medical, and I'm kind of like, this is kind of dumb. Like, why? I can go to Pueblo 30 minutes from here and do whatever I want. But you come in here. It's so that's one thing I'm glad we didn't do. And it helps with the kids too. The kids have less access to the black market. And I think another issue that we have right now is it's so new that the black market's still there. So it's kind of like dying out, and it's going to take a little bit. But yeah, just be vigilant with your kids. If you have nephews, or you have siblings who are younger than you, and you're old enough to use, put that stuff away. Put it in a cabinet, lock it away. When my nephews come over, I don't want them to have any of that. They're only like 5 and 6, so they have they want Legos, but still they don't really want cannabis right now. But still, I don't want them to run into that. Or get curious. I tell them and I teach them about cannabis and stuff like that, but I don't want them to have access to it. And so if you guys are kind of wondering how you can help, that's something simple like that. If you have a family member that's young, just put it away, educate them, educate them on cannabis. That's one of the best things I do. I try to teach my nephews about it, because it's legal and it's not going to go anywhere. And so it's just, education goes a long way. My parents were both educators, and so I believe in education 100%, and I've seen it change people's lives. So is there anything you want to add on the kids things before we move on?
When the issue on the 300 foot buffer died at council a while ago, I remember one of the speakers who came had all of this data around kids and how marketing influences them and all of these things. And one of the things that she said was, they're getting all these edibles, they're getting all this cannabis and using it. And I was like, where have you heard of a local retailer doing that, right? And she said, well, no, I don't have that. And I just feel like it's really important that we call the BS, that we really interrupt those really dangerous narratives that exist, because people can throw numbers, statistics at you all day long, but at the end of the day, what we need to do is really hone in on the local, on what's happening here, and again, address the issues at the root cause.
I agree. And, I'm glad you bring that up because, as I said before, yeah, it's mostly black market cannabis.
Yeah.
And, it's not the legal cannabis. And that's what we said, kids aren't going to have access to legal cannabis because they get carded.
Yes, it's incredible. And for people who haven't gone, go into a retailer, go see how it's very like on the ball, like and you're getting carded as soon as you walk in, right? So you might not even see product when you walk into the door, right?
Yeah, sometimes
Most
it's like a
likely.
window and you're just like
Yes.
giving the dude your ID and he has to scan it. It's harder to buy cannabis than it is alcohol.
Way harder.
Yeah, it's a lot harder.
Guns, probably.
Yeah.
Right?
I have a harder time buying cannabis than I do guns. You're right.
So I just want to encourage people. Obviously, your watchers are probably supporters, but if you know people who are resistant, like have parents visit a retailer and see how the process works because it's very strict.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's not like, a back alley deal, like, meeting a dude in a parking lot kind of thing,
The trunk of the car.
Open up his
Yeah, exactly.
No, it's not like that. They're legitimate businesses and that's how they should be treated.
Yep.
But if there is someone, which I haven't seen any, but if there is ones, you guys can call the CCD this and that. Please do. But from my experience, these kids are getting it from the black market places where they don't card. And shame on you, whoever sells to kids. That is just terrible.
Yeah.
Kids can lie. I don't know, but still at the same time, it's still one of those things that you just don't sell to kids, and kids really shouldn't be getting a hold of cannabis. And I get it, been a kid before, but we got to actually blame the problem where it actually is and not where it's not, because then we end up with this whole, of pitchforks and torches kind of thing, and the cannabis is drawn out of town. But we're here to help. And we're here to, work with the community and everything. And we want the black market to go away. There's a lot of money in this. So,
and that's another thing I want to say is that all the advocates I've talked to, Mesilla Valley Pharmacy, like all the folks that are at the front lines, they're saying, come talk to us. We'll do presentations at schools. Like you all have been incredibly open to teaching the community and to bringing the community along. And I just want to, it could be very easy for you all to be resentful and angry, and maybe you are, but what I've seen is that you're really open to helping people walk this path.
Yeah, and we're used to people kind of being mean to us just for who we are. So we still love you. We just know your lack of education of the matters. We know that it could change. And Mesilla Valley Pharmacy, they're great. I actually had Joaquin on the show a couple weeks ago, and it was really good. The first pharmacy in America to sell cannabis, and that's great right here in Las Cruces. And before we move on to that real quick, one thing I wanted to say is a lot of the struggles we have with black market cannabis comes from California, Oklahoma. And that's actually where Texas's black market cannabis, a lot of it comes from, is Oklahoma, because they have a no plant count limit there. So they grow hundreds of acres of cannabis. And then whenever you go to an extractor, they ask you for tons. And then come to find out, they have 8,000 illegal grows there. And out of those, 2,000 of them are Chinese government owned.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so like it's a mess over there, and a lot of that,
like a conspiracy theory.
It does, but it's true. Like you could look it up. I covered it last week. It sounds like it, but I just want to keep letting you guys know that we are not the issue. No. We're barely able to produce enough cannabis for our own state, let alone other states. Yeah, we're getting stuff from other places here too, and that's one of our issues. Is we are getting out of state cannabis, and if you see that at a dispensary, call the CCD and let them know, we're not supposed to be getting out of state cannabis, because that can be dangerous. A lot of the places that send their stuff out of state is either failed testing, there's too much of it, or it wasn't tested at all. They just got to get rid of it. So, they bring it here, put a testing on it, and then put it on the shelf. And so be vigilant of that too. That is happening. I want to mention that before we move on. But our biggest issue is California and Oklahoma. Colorado maybe in the north a little bit, but they're not as much as the issue as those two states are because of the way that they went about it.
Interesting.
Yeah, so we'll move on. We'll talk about Mesilla Valley. I know you want to talk about Mesilla Valley Pharmacy. So it was really cool to see the whole process with you guys and everything. I know it was a real struggle with the city council. I watched some of the hearings. I was there for a couple, and it was a struggle. So what was your stance with them?
It was such a long meeting because there's so many people who wanted to provide public comment. But so essentially, the pharmacy, brand new pharmacy, locally owned, it's really incredible, right? Like you think pharmacies, you think Walgreens, these big things. No, these are like homegrown folks, like locally owned. They took up an empty location. They're really incredible. Their issue is that they're right next to a school, the New American School, which is an alternative school, right? It's for older folks who want to get their GED. It's for younger kids who just like regular traditional school isn't really for them. They're door to door, almost 300 CE apart, and so they were still within that buffer, so they had to get a special use permit. And the Planning and Zoning Committee, which is what they go to, and those folks are appointed by each city council person, and they granted it. I think they granted it.
I think
either they granted it.
It failed the first time.
It failed the first time, and so how it works is if PNZ says no, the person who requested it can appeal, and then the appeal comes to the city council.
That's what it was. Yeah.
Is that what happened?
To you guys. Yeah, they went to that, and then it went to you. Yes.
What can also happen is, let's say PNZ grants the permit, somebody else can appeal it, and then it comes to city council.
So it could still go to you guys either way.
Any appeal will come to city council for final decision. So whatever happened in that situation, it came to city council, and of course, people from the school and the deniers, all those turned out in droves, but so did the supporters.
Yeah.
Like, you all do that fantastically. You're organizing really, really well. And so the pharmacist gave a presentation, and it was pretty like heated. I think that passed unanimously. I was definitely leading the charge on this is a pharmacy. They have significantly more dangerous things that they're selling at this pharmacy that are very legal, that are very much in your cabinet in the bathroom, right? But I was really, really adamant that they should have that special use permit. They are a pharmacy. And I said something to that effect in my comments at the end, which is why the mayor changed his vote. He was going to deny it.
I was surprised, yeah.
And he ended up voting in favor of it, and it made a unanimous vote. Otherwise, like most of these things end up being 6-1, the mayor voting against anything. There's been some, like the 300-foot buffer, that was 3-4. But this one, I just feel like this is one of the most memorable things for me in the last year. One was the operating hours, but two, it was this because they're really trusted people in the community, these pharmacists, and they want to provide additional service to the community, not just people who have medical cards. And they have incredible requirements that they have to follow as a pharmacy. And for me, it just made a lot of sense to do it. So I was really, really happy to support them in that endeavor and to be part of history.
No, yeah, I agree. And it was great to see that amount of support and seeing the mayor change his vote. Because I was watching it, I was like, "Did he just say yeah?"
Yeah, everyone gasped. There's like a collective gasp in chambers
because he's always
I
no.
was very shocked.
Yeah, I was so shocked because every cannabis thing that's come up, he's voted no, and historically we were waiting for a no, and he was like, "Okay," and maybe we've grown on him. Maybe the industry. No, okay.
No, I'm just kidding. I give the mayor a lot of stuff, but I think this one in particular, what got him was it's a pharmacy, right? Like sense. I don't foresee him being supportive on anything else, just so you know.
Okay, makes sense. Yeah, that's fair enough. And I agree, like the pharmacies, they're qualified to sell some of the most dangerous stuff, known to man, opioids. And pharmacists, they know dosages, they know how to get you where you need to be, whatever. When I had Joaquin on the show, he was giving examples, and he was telling the audience. Yeah, it was great, and I was glad for that because it was an educational moment for the public. Like people can figure out what their dosages are. Go low, start slow, and go low. And start it at the low dosages and go higher from there. And yeah, it's great that we have that here because we're the only state and the only city in the nation that has this. Yeah. And it's a bragging right.
Absolutely.
We have some really educated people here at Cannabis. And it's really great. So. Yeah, and I'm so happy that do you guys plan on maybe? Are there any other pharmacies thinking of doing this? Do you know of?
None that I've heard of. None that have approached us. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, kind of curious because if one did, I figured a few would.
There are several other locally owned pharmacies, but none that I know have approached us.
Okay. Well, shoot. Yeah. Well, if they do, I'll be there to support them.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So moving on, we'll talk quickly about that bill I was talking about Texas. We started talking about it before the show, the pre-show, and everything, and it's one of those bills that I kind of feel they're kind of keeping hush hush and kind of under the thing and wanted to pass. And for those of you who don't know, I've been kind of covering this the past couple weeks on the show. HB 2833 is a Texas legislative bill, which, if passed and signed, would implement checkpoints that are from public roads going from New Mexico into Texas. So it'd be up to the local PD and everything to put it up. And we also found out through the beginning of the show, Gino, my producer, stated actually right here, boop, he pulled it up. So it looks like the department will establish the state border crossing in conjunction with local law enforcement authorities. The department and local law enforcement authorities share the cost of staffing at checkpoints. Now, this part right here, the bill tells me that I don't know how much support this is going to have from the PD, because if they have to pay for it, I don't
share
see
the
them.
cost.
Yeah, if they have to share the cost, I really don't see them wanting to do this, because
That means you will pay for it.
yeah, exactly. That means you're going to pay for it. There's two things I can see happening. Either they don't do it, or they do it and they're so strict that they're just taking everybody's money and stuff just so they can pay for this. To me, I really don't see the reason for this bill other than F you to New Mexico, because their real issue, like I said, is Oklahoma. Their rival in football, is their real issue. It's not us. Just a few residents come here and take it back. We're not like supplying a whole black market. So that's my kind of concern. I mean, what would be your concerns as a city councilor if something like this were to pass?
Oh my gosh. This is wild. I really feel like I hadn't heard about this until right before I got here, and I cannot believe it. This is wild. It's just Texas doing Texas. No offense, Texans.
Texas being Texas.
But I just, regulation like this is about control. And I think in many ways, Texas likes to control, whether it's women bodies or people experiencing cannabis or whatever else, right? And so I really think it's about control, and it's clear that they've seen the kind of impacts that this has had on New Mexico, and they're probably seeing the numbers of how many Texans are coming here. So I really hope this isn't real. I feel like this is really dangerous and unconstitutional, honestly. Like I would even say that internal border patrol checkpoints, even those are nearing the line of unconstitutional. And so this is just wild.
Yeah, it is, because it would be weird to deal with not only federal checkpoints, but state sanctioned checkpoints. Now we're feeling like we're not in America anymore, where we're allowed to move around freely through other states.
That's awful.
Yeah, it's awful. It makes us feel like we're criminals.
Yep.
Like we've done something so wrong, and it's ridiculous. This bill did have its first committee hearing. It was left pending, meaning it didn't get a hearing, which could be good, could be bad. Good meaning that it never gets heard. They don't have enough time. Bad meaning that it could die, but they could piggyback it onto another bill and kind of sneak it in. I found out that's how Texas does it. So that could be the thing. So stay vigilant. These aren't your representatives, so it's a little harder to talk to them. I know there's some groups in El Paso that are really on this. They're the ones who hit me up. I think it was the Dope Moms El Paso or Las Cruces that hit me up. Yeah, they sent me this, and shout out to them, keeping me updated, because I mean, I know a lot about New Mexico, Texas, it's a total different animal. But I'm glad they brought this up to me, because that is crazy, and they're worried about us, but California, Oklahoma are really fueling their black market, but they want to blame us. And another thing that worries me is it leaves it open in there for any crime. So women that got abortions would be targeted too. So it's not just cannabis users, that it alarms me. I have sisters, so, that really bothers me. If, something like that were to happen, my sister had to go somewhere else, and she went back to her home state and got in trouble for it, and got popped at a border or at a checkpoint coming in, not doing anything else other than that, it would suck.
I've been hearing stories since September, since Texas passed the most restrictive probably law, Oklahoma too, on abortions on women, who are now also seen as criminals, right? In many ways. Yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised if that was the true intention behind this bill. There's been, providers here this is wild. And I think I love this because there's this deep intersection between the work of control, right? Like this is about control, and there's deep intersection between all of these different kinds of advocacies, whether it's cannabis, whether it's reproductive justice. Providers in New Mexico saw like 150% increase of people from out of state coming to seek abortion care. And we don't have capacity. Like there are folks here who just don't have that capacity, but we're going to keep welcoming people who are seeking care here. We are going to do that. We're going to keep welcoming people who are seeking cannabis here. That is a commitment from, I think, the legislature, but certainly from the city council, from me. And I really feel like Oh, one of the things I was going to say was even now, women who are leaving states like Colorado, like New Mexico, who came here to seek reproductive care, they're going back and they're saying, don't give me pamphlets. Don't give me anything that indicates that I was here.
Yeah.
Like
That's
people are
crazy.
living in fear
Yeah.
because of these laws. And this only furthers that control.
Yeah.
And it is awful.
This reminds me of, places in the Middle East who have these very restrictive laws, because there's certain places in the Middle East where even if you consume cannabis elsewhere in another country, if you come back and you test positive, you're still breaking the law and you still go to jail. And there was an American who did that happened to him. And, he used cannabis in Vegas and he went back and he tested positive and he went to prison. So this reminds me of stuff like that, that is not what America is about. Like you have,
as someone who's in the military, I cannot imagine
that
like experience.
Experiencing that and then coming home and experiencing that, it doesn't feel good. Like coming home, I thought I was in a free country. I thought I was fighting for a free country. But now I'm seeing this and it's something totally different. Like this isn't the country that I fought for, and that breaks my heart. And that's one reason why I wanted to bring this up, because, this doesn't just affect us in this state, it affects everybody, and it affects us veterans who put our lives and sometimes did put our life on the line and didn't come back. And now you're telling us that something like this is the way it's going to be. It's a little ridiculous.
Thank you for speaking on this. I really appreciate it.
No problem.
Honestly, like this can be a really hot topic for your listeners that might not all be on the same page, right? But like I just want to thank you for speaking on this issue because it's really important. And at the core of it, it's about the same thing, which is control. Yeah,
it is. And that's all I see in this bill is just straight control. Like we want to control what's coming in, what's going out, what's coming back in, like ins and out. And it's crazy. I mean, they're making one state the issue because they can't handle their own issues or address it in a healthy manner. Instead they just want to go back 200 years and, throw dirt over it. So that's one reason why I wanted to bring this up. I might still keep bringing it up until you get through everybody's head and we do something about this, because this is alarming. This bill should not pass. This needs to die. This affects every New Mexican essentially. The state of Texas pretty much wraps around the whole state on one side. And, it's really alarming. So we'll move on from this conversation, but I just wanted to update you guys on that. And let you guys know what's going on. Hopefully this dies, but it's alarming at the fact that it's there in the first place, So, but moving on. That's it for 2883. I'll probably update you guys next week on it again. So this is going to be part of the last part of the episode. I really wanted to save this to the end, the best for the last. Now we'll be talking about Councilor Bencomo and, all about you and everything, how long you've been a, counselor. And I guess I'll go right into the questions.
Okay.
How long have you been in your position?
Yes. So this is my 4th and technically the final year of my term.
Okay, so you're up for re-election.
Yep.
Oh, okay, nice. Yeah. I mean, if you're in my area, I would vote for you, but I can't. I'll still vote for Becky. Don't get me wrong.
So this year, because we're staggered, and so this year it's the mayor is up for election, the mayor's seat, District 1, District 2, and District 4.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's good to know. So Las Cruces listeners, you just found out who you're going to be voting for this year. And please go out and vote. We have such a low voter turnout in our county. It's really sad, actually.
Especially for municipal elections.
Yeah, and guys, municipal elections are more important than any other election.
Yes.
It's so important that you guys come to municipal elections. Like this directly affects you. Like the things we've talked about on the show are what the city has the power to do. And if you guys don't show up, you end up with representation that doesn't match what everyone else wants. And so it's great that we have someone that, actually does. But if you don't come out and vote, that might change. So, it's really important that we all do go out and vote. I try to vote as much as I can. Actually, I got a thing in the mail from the state. I think it said I vote 95% more than people in my age group, which is sad. Like, yay for me, but it's actually really sad.
You're right. That is sad.
I'm like, you mean people in the mid-30s aren't voting? I'm like, oh, no. So guys, please go out and vote. It is your right.
You're in your mid-30s?
Yeah, I'm 36.
You look really young.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, I get that a lot.
Sorry.
Yeah, I get that a lot, actually. People my age, old people or young looking old people.
Hey.
I didn't ask how old you are. I won't guess. So 25?
Yeah.
25? Cool.
I turned 35 April 19th.
Oh,
So-
okay. Oh, so you're oh, I'm older
Yeah.
than
Mhm.
you. I forget, I'm old sometimes. I'm like, oh yeah, I am old, huh?
Watch it with the old, okay?
I'm older, so yeah, I get it. So yeah, you've been in your position for a minute, so it's great, and it's young blood because we're used to people in your position, lawmakers, whatever, being these old crusty white dudes, and it's really great that we have
Yeah.
some young blood in it, and women too. It's great that that we have such a robust city council because it shows younger women that this is
Yeah.
possible. You can do that.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
can totally be on city council. You can totally be governor.
Yeah.
You can totally be vice president.
Yep.
And eventually we'll probably have one that's a president.
Hopefully sooner than later.
Yeah. Let's hope it's not another 50 years.
No.
So, but yeah, down to another question. I guess we'll go on. I kind of blabbering. Where are you from originally?
Yeah, I'm originally from Chihuahua, Mexico.
Okay.
Actually, I'm an immigrant. My family and I came to the United States when I was 8 years old, and
Yeah.
we ended up in Colorado, where my parents still live. I could not wait to get out of there. I was formerly undocumented, actually, and
Okay.
I became a naturalized citizen when I was 16, which changed my whole life.
Yeah.
And I decided to come to school at New Mexico State University, and I never left.
Oh, nice. So it's like you're from here, essentially.
I do,
Yeah,
and also
yeah.
I love the board. So for a lot of immigrants in this country, like they will spend a lifetime trying to find that feeling of home again, right?
Mhm.
Like for a lot of people, it feels like displacement, and I found that here, and I think
Yeah.
it's because the border is like the best of both worlds, like there's this deep connection to where I'm originally from, and there's this deep connection to the place that raised me, and
Yeah.
so I love it here.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you have the love of both worlds. Do you have dual citizenship? Did you get that?
I
or-
don't. You know
No?
what? I don't have dual citizenship. Yeah, I've heard there's some weird stuff. I don't know. It sounds
Some whatever. Yeah.
complicated.
A lot of my
Yeah.
military friends that got their citizenship kept dual
Yeah.
citizenship.
Oh,
That's
they
why I asked.
did.
Yeah, because the
Yeah.
military will help you get your citizenship if you do the right
Mhm.
paperwork,
Yep.
of course.
Yep.
So yeah, that's why I ask. I always ask people, like, did you keep
Yeah.
dual? Because I think it's a good idea keeping dual citizenship. Like I have friends who were American citizens, but their parents were military, so they were born in other countries like the Philippines.
Yeah.
And one of the girls I went to high school with, she told me, she's like, I have dual citizenship. I was like,
Yeah.
where? She's like, the
cool.
Philippines. I was like,
Yeah.
you're Filipino? She was like, technically, yeah, because I was born there. She was
Yeah.
like, she was a straight white girl. She was a
I
straight
would
white
think
girl.
Filipinos and Mexicans are like distant cousins. I think
Kind
we're
of,
very
yeah.
similar.
We have a lot
Yeah.
of. I've dated a lot of Filipino girls in
Yeah.
my day, and yeah, a lot of similarities. I'm like,
So
you guys do
many,
that too?
right?
Chicharrones
Yes.
even,
Yes.
but they eat it with vinegar. You ever done that?
Mm.
Really good. You should try it. Yeah. Don't dock it till you try
That's
it.
right.
Dip it in some vinegar.
That's right. I
Mm.
put mayonnaise on my tamales, and people think that's weird. So you're right. Don't
Yeah,
until
yeah.
you try it.
Or ketchup on pizza. Yeah, stuff like that. So that's cool. And you bring that immigrant, mindset and everything.
Yeah.
You have a different mindset because there's a few of our lawmakers actually. I know Javier Martinez. He's from Mexico
Yeah.
too.
Yes, he is.
He's one of the immigrant
Congressman
lawmakers.
Gay Vasquez.
Yeah, Gabe Vasquez
Yeah.
as well. Yes, you're right. I had a really good relationship with him when he was on city
Yeah.
council. It was really cool. He was my city representative, I believe.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah, and I got to speak with him a few times. He's doing great things over in
Yeah,
Congress now,
he
so it's
is.
great to hear
Yeah.
that and see that. And yeah, we have a few that are in our state, but not too long ago, Mexico and New Mexico were one place. So
Yeah.
it's just kind of like bringing us back together. And I think that's another reason why it kind of feels like home because
Mhm.
we have such that commonality.
Yeah,
it was
we're very bicultural.
yeah,
Mhm.
totally, 100%. And New Mexico, we do have our differences. We like our green chile more, but there's a lot more similarities to kind of like with us and Filipinos.
Mhm.
So what made you run for city council? That's actually a big question.
Yeah, so I was doing community organizing for almost 10 years. I
Mhm.
was working for a local nonprofit here, doing mostly immigrant rights advocacy, workers' rights advocacy, border rights advocacy. And I really felt like doing that work. I felt like often people who were directly impacted by policies were not engaged, right? Like my family came here in the 90s. It took me till I was in college to really understand why. And it was NAFTA, the North
okay,
American
yeah.
Free Trade Agreement that just threw small rural farmers, which was my family, into even further poverty. And so a lot of people had to leave, either go to big cities or come to the United States. I mean, thousands of people did that in the 90s. And that's when I started connecting the dots much older, where I was like, wow, if people in Mexico had been consulted about this, maybe it wouldn't have happened, right?
Yeah.
When we talk about wages, workers aren't consulted, right?
Mhm.
When we talk about, thankfully, that has changed. Like when we talked about cannabis at the legislature, you all were consulted.
Yeah.
But
thank
even
God.
then, some legislators were asking weird questions, right?
Yeah, it was weird.
So,
I'm like,
yeah, so it's like when people who don't know the issue they're legislating on are elected, and then they're impacting our lives. And I
Mhm.
thought, there are not a lot of people like me in office, immigrants, young women. I'm currently the youngest person on the council.
oh wow.
And I was like, this is another way I can impact my community. And
Mhm.
so I did this program called Emerge. Emerge trains women who are Democrats to run for office. And we're very successful in New Mexico. If you do Emerge, we have an 87% win rate, which
Oh,
is an
wow.
incredible program. So
Yeah.
if there's anybody out there watching, does not matter how old you are, well, 18 and older, obviously, but if you're interested in running for office, reach out to me. I would be happy to put you in connection with this program because it changed my life. And it's the reason that I thought, you know what, I can do this. And I did in 2019. I had 2 opponents. It was 3 of us in that race, and
I think I remember that. Yeah.
I won.
Yeah.
And here I am. And 3 months into my first term, we took office January 1st, 2020. 3 months later, the pandemic happened.
Oh
So
yeah. Ooh, that's a messy.
it was awful, honestly. Like, I'm glad I was there. I'm happy I was there because we helped give a ton of aid to the people who really needed it, and they feel like I'm glad that I was in that space, but it was really, really hard.
Yeah, it
It
must
was
have
really
been.
awful.
Yeah. Who were your opponents, if you don't mind me asking?
No, it was public information. It's Antoinette Reyes and Robert Palacios were the
Okay.
2 people that I ran against.
Wow. So that
Yeah.
was a pretty stacked race, actually.
Yeah.
You don't really see
Mhm.
that, locally that
Yeah.
often.
And then we have ranked choice voting
Yes,
in
yes.
Las Cruces, which is incredible.
I love ranked choice
I'm
voting.
so glad you
Yeah,
do.
I do. I love it. And at first
Oh,
it
I'm so
confused
glad
me.
you do.
Yeah,
Yeah,
at first it confused
totally.
me. But like after I had actually voted with ranked choice voting, I was
Yeah.
like, you know what? This makes sense. I feel
Doesn't
like I'm
it?
not wasting a vote.
Doesn't
Yeah.
it?
You feel like you're not wasting. And if you guys don't know what ranked choice voting is say you have 3 candidates, and you pick. It says, okay, pick your top 3, or who's your number 1 top pick?
Mhm.
Okay, it's the number 2 candidate. Okay, who's your second pick? Okay, number 1 candidate. Who's your third pick? Okay, number whatever 3 candidate. And so if the first candidate doesn't get enough votes, the second one gets it.
50 plus 1.
Yeah, 50
Yeah.
plus 1, then it goes to the second one. So
Mhm.
you still get a voice and option. So your second choice could win, is essentially
Yes.
what it is.
Yeah.
If your first choice doesn't win, your second choice has an option.
Yep.
And so I really like that. It gives us more voice. It
Yes.
gives us more control over
Yep.
our voting.
And sometimes you go to the ballot box and you're like, I don't want to vote for this person, but I
Yeah.
have to. They're
Yeah.
the closest one, but you're like, kind of plug your nose and vote. What ranked choice voting allows you to do is really vote your values.
Yeah.
Like, go in there and vote for who you really believe, and then you get a second opportunity. If there's
Mhm.
more than 2 people on that ballot, you get as many opportunities you want. 4 years ago, there was 10 people who ran for mayor. You could have ranked all 10. I
Yeah.
didn't, because I didn't believe in some of those people's beliefs. But you could rank as many as you want. And honestly, it's taken the country by storm. More and more cities are adopting it. Minnesota adopted it statewide.
Really? That's cool.
So ranked choice voting is really becoming popular.
No, and I like it. If you guys don't know, our whole nation's government is pretty much an experiment. So this is
Mhm.
just us advancing our government
Totally.
and the American experiment is in general. So I love the fact that, when I moved here, because, from Otero County, and then
Yeah.
before that I lived in Hawaii, but I didn't vote
Hmm.
when I was there because I was still a resident here.
Oh, right.
So I didn't really start voting until I moved back. And
Mhm.
actually when I was in the military, they didn't really give us an opportunity to vote, unless
That's
you were really
wild.
vigilant about it. Yeah. And I was, intel and all this stuff, so we were really busy.
That's wild.
Yeah, and they're supposed to be very supportive, but it really wasn't.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I was like,
That's for another podcast.
yeah, that's for another episode with the veterans. But yeah, it was really interesting. My other question for you, and I guess going off the questions, do you use cannabis, or have you ever used cannabis?
I
No?
have.
Okay.
Yes. When I was in college, I used a lot of cannabis. I did, though. I mean, I did lots of other silly things as well. But then I just kind of stopped, and then I never used again.
Oh,
But
okay.
my brother is a user of cannabis, and honestly, that's why I feel so passionate about this issue, because he's gotten in trouble in Colorado, and
Mhm.
I just feel like there's that big intersection between like social justice and cannabis, and making sure that young brown and black kids aren't going to jail for this. That's that's why I care so much about it.
That's great. Yeah. And I was going to ask you that, like what really brought you to this? Because mine
Yeah.
was, I lost my sister to prescription pills.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
And that's really what, brought me to where I am. So, it's good to, not good, but, it's relieving to hear that someone else's family member, kind of brought you to this as well too, not just me.
Yeah.
And it's when it's your family members affected, it kind of just makes it more personal.
Yes, and I think politics is personal.
Yeah, it's very personal. Yeah,
local politics especially is incredibly personal.
Drill it in their head.
Yes, and for me, like people who see me, who disagree with me, they're just like, "You're woke, you're socialist." They call me everything. But if they just asked, why do you care so much about this particular issue or any issue, they would understand. They would know that I probably have a deeply personal story about that issue, and that's why I care about it.
And a lot of people don't think to ask that.
No.
Well, why? And that's one reason why I'm like, well, why do you support cannabis? Is it just for freedom? Is it for personal reason? Everybody has their own reason.
Everybody has their own reason, and every reason is valid, right? Mine is my brother.
Yeah, exactly. So I've attended a few city councils in the past.
Yeah.
And when you guys decided to move the operating hours and everything, what was like your thought process and what were your constituents saying? I know we've talked about this already, but I didn't ask about like what was your thoughts and what were the constituents saying? Because I know what I said and what I think, but that's only one person.
Yeah, I wouldn't even say it was 50-50. I definitely got some of the emails that were like, don't do it. We don't want to, like the folks that are deeply afraid and I think ignorant about the issue. I definitely got some of those, but the majority was from you all. I mean, you all did great organizing because I got a ton of emails and then a ton of people who came and spoke about their personal story with cannabis and why it matters to them and why we shouldn't restrict it. And that's the approach that I took. Really, I am not an expert on this issue at all. I see you as the experts, people like Scott Kraling, there are folks in our community who I go to and say, hey, I don't understand this issue. Hey, how can I talk about this better? I don't want to compare it to, one of these folks was like, stop comparing it to alcohol. Like it's just, and I was like, you know what? That's like, I want to take that feedback. And I feel like you all have been doing such a good job. And that's why I take the positions that I do when I'm on the dais, when it comes to cannabis. It's not just because this is what I think. It's because I know there's a right way to do it, and I want to go to the folks that know about it.
That's great because I say this all the time. No one's really done cannabis regulation correctly yet. We're getting close. And I think New Mexico is on the right track.
I think so.
Yeah, I think we're on the right track to doing it correctly. However, no one's done it correctly 100% yet, and we're still figuring it out. And it's going to be a learning curve and a learning process. But if we're not involved, then it's just going to kind of dwindle.
You have to stay involved.
Yeah, and that's one thing I keep telling these other businesses who don't want to get involved. I'm like, we're better together.
Yeah.
This industry.
Yeah.
And actually, one of the staff, I was talking to them here in City Council after one of those hearings, and he told us, you guys need to band together as an industry. He said the microbrews got what they wanted because they told the lawmakers what they wanted.
Yep.
And that's one thing I keep telling everybody. I'm like, guys, we need to work together. If we work together as one, then we get what we want because we're the industry.
You're
that's
the experts.
We're the experts. They I wouldn't say have to come to us, but they should be able to come to us. Yes. They should want to come to us,
And if they're not, you need to go to them.
Yeah, exactly. Honestly. Yeah. That's the way our government works.
Yes.
You're allowed to talk to everybody in your government. You can email the president.
You can.
Yeah, you can email the president. I don't know if he's going to respond. Maybe one of his aides. But yeah, you can totally do that. So what are other plans you really want, with cannabis and everything in the city? What's your new plans? Do you want to see more consumption lounges?
Yes, actually earlier I was like, I forgot this when we were talking about that. I think one of the things that I would really love to explore, consumption lounges, and something I don't necessarily feel ready yet for, but I really want to explore and see what other folks have done is outdoor consumption. I'm really about like consent, right? And then allowing people to have consent on what they consume. And so I don't know if other places have done it in California and other states, but folks have talk to me about like what would outdoor consumption look like, and I think that's something I would really like to learn more about. That's great. I'd love to be in on that conversation, to be honest, because I have some ideas and thoughts and all that. Because when I was on SM 105, it was the medical cannabis changes task force that the governor did a few years back before we changed the medical. I was actually on the consumption lounge part. So consumption lounges are like my baby. Oh, okay. It's like my baby. I'm so glad to know. Yeah, it is. And whenever I hear consumption lounges, I'm like, because
if you guys didn't know, when I proposed consumption lounges, well, the group, we all kind of came together, but
Mhm.
my idea was anywhere and everywhere. And what it was initially for was for military spouses that live on base that have a cannabis card, because I knew a few.
Oh.
People who live in government housing, people that live on Indian reservations or Native American reservations, anybody that just can't consume at home. It was supposed to be a place for them to go consume, store the cannabis, and then leave.
Mhm.
And so it turned into something else. I knew it wasn't going to stick like that, but I shot for the stars, and we got what
That's
we
what
got.
you do.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
you work backwards.
Yeah, then we work backwards, and we got what we have. And it's just great to see that. I'd really love to see more consumption lounges and the outdoor consumption, because we should feel like we can enjoy our beautiful scenery and smoke at the same time. And one thing I want to mention is, for those out there who don't know, a lot of the cannabis consumption isn't always smoking. Sometimes it's edibles, sometimes it's vaping, sometimes it's a
There's
dab.
cool stuff.
Yeah, there's all kinds. So it's not just
really
smoke.
creative.
Yeah.
Y'all are creative, okay?
I did say once we legalized it, the innovation was going to go.
Yes.
And it's kind of done that. And it's great that, you're very supportive of cannabis and everything. All right. What if and this is kind of my own thought, I've always wanted to see this. What about outdoor events for cannabis? I would really love to see something like that. I kind of feel Cruces would be a perfect spot. What do you think the city would be behind something like that?
I don't know.
Okay.
Is the easy answer.
Yeah.
The short answer. But I think we'd be open to it. I think you've had experiences with our economic development staff who are really supportive, right? Like they're holding like weekly meetings for cannabis retailers to really know how to open up your business and all the regulations. And I feel like staff have really taken an ownership of this industry. They want to see it thrive as well. If you haven't met our assistant city manager, Ikani Tamepao,
he's dope. Yeah,
he's so cool,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And
cool.
he came from California, so he's like, here we go, let's
He's an
do
islander,
this,
right?
Yes.
Yeah, I knew when I met him. I lived in Hawaii, so I
he's
knew.
an
I was
islander.
like, yeah, I know you, bro.
So is our city manager. He's Samoan. And
the other guy,
he's incredible. By the way, city manager in the city is one of the most important people in the city. Get to know him. But I really feel like city staff is really willing to come to the table, really open about how do we make this work? How do we do it responsibly? And so do I think it can happen? Yeah, actually I do. When? I don't know. I think I think what I want to convey to is that, like, given that there's still a lot of anxiety, how do we walk slowly but surely forward, right? Like, I don't want to throw too much stuff at the community and really panic everybody, but I also think we should challenge and push and come up with innovative things. And so somebody did email me actually a while ago about, hey, 420 is coming, let's talk about some outdoor stuff. And I don't know what that would look like this year, but I think the city, and certainly I'll speak for myself, and honestly the majority of my colleagues, are totally willing to have that conversation.
That'd be great. And if there's a time that you guys would want to, I'd be down to sit down with that. Because I've always seen the fairgrounds as a perfect spot for something like that. It's out of the city, it's on its own thing, and it's tons of space.
And people already know it as a place where there's wine festivals and all kinds of things, right?
And it'd be great. There's tons of room, and there's places for different, because music, cannabis and music, they go together.
Oh, absolutely.
Music goes with anything, to be honest. But particularly with cannabis, you always have the two together. Concerts. I'm a big reggae fan. I've always been a reggae fan. So because I use cannabis. When I got stationed in Hawaii, I was like, perfect. So, but great. Is there anything else that you maybe want to tell the audience or want to bring up or anything like that before we end the show today?
I will. One other thing about consumption, and I'll say that.
For sure.
Again, stories. When I went to one of the consumption lounges in town and I visited, there was a person there who I was talking to, and she was like, I don't drink alcohol, and often I go to bars and I can't partake in what my friends are doing. And she was like, but I come here now and it feels like that. It feels like this social part of this thing that I don't have to hide anymore, be shameful of. And that's what I want to really reiterate and to you all, is that your stories really, really matter. They matter to me. They matter to my colleagues. That's how you pass meaningful change. That's how you transform hearts and minds. It's not always statistics and studies. Sometimes it is, and they're valuable. But really, for me, it's those personal stories about why you care about this issue, about why cannabis is important to your life, and keep organizing locally for sure. I hope that you all get involved in the races this year, not just for my benefit, but because that's 4 people that could be gone.
Mhm.
That 4 is the majority. Like you
Yeah.
could have a really different city council next year. And if you care about this issue, then come out and support the people who you think support your values, and get involved. I think right now is the perfect time to get involved with the state legislators as
Mhm.
well, right? Make sure that you're talking about those taxes. We
Yeah.
don't want to go backwards because of the tax
Mhm.
issue. Javier Martinez, Representative Javier Martinez, who led on this issue, is not the Speaker of the House.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
I just keep talking to the people who you've elected on this issue and keep sharing why it's so important to you.
I make sure to tag him on Twitter sometimes.
Good.
Yeah,
Yes.
you know, so he
Yes.
sees
He's
stuff.
incredible. And
Yeah.
I just feel like he's such a good leader, and he will listen as well.
I agree. And, you know, they brought up a, you know, really good bill, and I'm so glad it passed because we
Yeah.
are where we are today.
Yep.
And you're sitting here with me for one of those reasons. So
Yeah.
thank you
Yeah.
so much for joining me today. This was such a great
Yes.
episode, and you brought in a lot of information that I didn't know today, and I learned a lot.
I'm so glad you
yeah.
invited me. Thank you.
Thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you all for watching. I'll be back again next week with another episode of Ask Chad Grassy Logic. Thank you again, Councilor Bencomo,
Yep.
for joining me. And if you guys live in Las Cruces, make sure to vote when it comes time, guys. You know, it's so important. You have no clue. And obviously, because, you know, our voter turnout is really low. So without further ado, this is the end of the show. And I'm going to leave you guys with It's 420.